Imagine opening a package and coming face to face with an indescribable horror, parts of a woman's body sent to different parts of the country. It sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but it is a real event described in the Bible. This is one of the most disturbing stories in Scripture, a narrative so dark that many avoid talking about it. But today, we are going to dive deep into this biblical passage, uncovering its social impact and its spiritual lessons for today. If you choose to continue, prepare yourself for a powerful reflection on the dangers of moral decay and what happens when a society turns away from God. Welcome to Grace's Enigma. Israel was experiencing one of the most chaotic periods in its history. The book of Judges describes a continuous cycle of rebellion and suffering. The people turned away from God, fell into sin, suffered the consequences, and cried out for help. However, Judges 19 presents an even deeper level of moral and spiritual corruption. In Judges chapter 19 verse 1 it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, everyone did what was right in his own eyes." This phrase, repeated throughout the book, reveals a scene of anarchy and the absence of spiritual leadership. Each tribe acted according to its own will, completely ignoring God's commandments. Sin had spread like poison, contaminating every sphere of society. Idolatry had become common, divine principles were forgotten, and justice had been distorted. The lack of leadership to guide the people according to God's will allowed chaos to take hold. The account makes us reflect. What happens when a society decides to live without God? What occurs when values become relative and morality turns into nothing more than a matter of convenience? Judges 19 answers with a brutal story, showing just how far humanity can go when it completely turns away from divine truth. This story serves as a warning for today's world. We see societies drifting away from divine principles and reaping the fruits of injustice, violence, and corruption. The book of Proverbs, chapter 29, verse 18, warns us, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." When there is no solid moral foundation, boundaries dissolve, and injustice thrives. As we move forward in this story, we will see how spiritual decay led to one of the darkest episodes in the Bible. And the worst part? This is not just an ancient story. Its impact and lessons remain relevant to this day. The account begins with a Levite, a man who was supposed to serve God, but whose relationship with his concubine reveals deep moral and spiritual flaws. The woman flees from the Levite's house and returns to her father's home, where she stays for 4 months. The Levite then decides to go after her, but his motivation is questionable. Did he truly care about her, or was he only concerned about his reputation and rights? Upon arriving at the woman's father's house, the Levite was warmly received. The father insisted that they stay longer, offering hospitality and trying to delay their departure. After a few days, the Levite finally decides to leave with his concubine. The journey begins without any issues, but the timing of their departure puts them in a vulnerable position, as they were far from a safe place to spend the night. By evening, they arrived near Jebus, which would later become Jerusalem, but the Levite refused to stay there because the city did not belong to the Israelites.
Deixoi se to continue travelo em Gibeia, a city of the tribe of Benjamin, semi duais e bate ultimatele provet fatal.
They arrived in the evening and waited for someone to offer them shelter. However, unlike the hospitality norms so highly valued among the Hebrews, no one took them in, a clear sign of the moral decay of that place. What happened in that city was not just an isolated event, but a reflection of what happens when a society completely loses the fear of God. The signs were everywhere, from the lack of hospitality to the absence of justice. This episode reminds us that sin, when tolerated and normalized, always leads to destructive consequences. The tragedy that was about to unfold would serve as a wake-up call for the entire nation, triggering a series of events that would change Israel forever. The Levite, his concubine, and a servant arrived in Gibeah, a city of the tribe of Benjamin. Amid the lack of hospitality, an old man offered to take them in. While they were talking cheerfully, some wicked men from the city surrounded the house and began banging on the door. They said to the old man, "Bring out the man who is staying in your house. We want to have relations with him." Then the old man stepped outside and said, "No, my friends. Please do not commit such an evil and immoral act. This man is my guest. Look. Here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can do to them whatever you wish. But do not do this horrible thing to this man. But they refused to listen to him. Then the Levite took his concubine, put her outside, and handed her over to them. They forced her and abused her all night long, only letting her go in the morning. The violence and depravity in Gibeah reveal a people who had completely lost the fear of God. What was supposed to be a society built on justice and hospitality had become a reflection of spiritual and moral decay. The men of the city, with no sense of dignity or respect for others, turned the night into a scene of horror. The Levite's cowardice in handing over his concubine reveals how indifference and the coldness of the human heart can allow unacceptable atrocities. He did not fight for her, did not cry out for help, he simply gave in to the pressure of the wicked. This episode reminds us that failing to stand against evil is also a great sin. The brutality committed against the woman was not just a crime against her, but a reflection of the moral failure of the entire society. When justice is ignored and wickedness becomes normalized, human dignity disappears. In the next section, we will see how this terrible crime sparked a national reaction and led Israel into a devastating conflict. What happened in Gibeah could not be ignored, and the consequences were overwhelming. At dawn, the woman came and collapsed in front of the house where her husband was. She remained there until daylight. In the morning, the husband got up to continue the journey. When he opened the door, he found his concubine collapsed in front of the house. Then he said to her, "Get up. Let's go." But there was no response. So he placed her body across the donkey and set out on his journey home. When he arrived, he went inside, took a knife, and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces. Then he sent a piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who saw it said, "We have never seen anything like this. Nothing like this has ever happened since the Israelites came out of Egypt. Think about it. What should we do now?" The impact of this action was so great that it triggered a civil war. The tribes of Israel turned against Benjamin, demanding that they hand over the guilty men. However, the tribe of Benjamin refused, and the war led to a devastating massacre. The response of the tribes was ruthless. More than 25,000 men from the tribe of Benjamin were killed, drastically reducing its population. The destruction was so severe that Israel realized too late the gravity of their retaliation. This event demonstrates how the pursuit of vengeance can quickly spiral out of control. The initial desire for justice led to a bloodbath that nearly wiped out one of the tribes of Israel. This conflict shows that unrestrained anger can bring irreversible consequences, affecting future generations. Moreover, the lack of mediation and dialogue prevented any attempt at a peaceful resolution. Tribal pride and the thirst for vengeance fueled this destruction. In the end, the Israelites deeply regretted what they had done, realizing that violence had not brought true justice, but rather more suffering. Here, we see how the pursuit of vengeance can lead to large-scale destruction. In Matthew 5 verse 44, Jesus teaches us, "Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you." Violence is never the answer to violence. Only forgiveness and true justice can bring restoration. This story is not just an ancient account, but a powerful warning for today. When society turns away from God, it becomes increasingly violent, selfish, and devoid of justice. When sin is normalized, human dignity is discarded, and suffering increases. However, the message of the Bible does not end in despair. Jesus Christ came into the world to offer redemption and transformation. He is the light that dispels darkness, the justice that restores the oppressed. In John 8 verse 12, Jesus declares, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The story of the dismembered woman teaches us that turning away from God leads to destruction, but it also calls us to be agents of change. If we want a better world, we must commit ourselves to the truth, justice, and love of Christ. The narrative of Judges 19 to 21 confronts us with the worst of humanity, but also challenges us to be different. In a world where violence and injustice still prevail, we are called to live by faith, seek justice, and proclaim the love of God. If this story impacted you, share this reflection and help spread the light of Christ. And if you want to continue exploring deep biblical themes, don't forget to like the channel, share this video, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss content that will impact your life. May God bless you and strengthen you on your journey of faith.